Chapter 14:11. Gu Shangyin suddenly felt uncomfortable. She stood up irritably and said, "Shall I send you back?" Qiao Zhihe listened to her cold voice and watched her put on the hood again. He was disappointed. He felt that it was rare to see Sister Death like that. Now, she had become cold and unapproachable. Gu Shangyin sent Qiao Zhihe home. She did not talk to the young man as she felt that she could not bear to see his bright eyes again. He Qing was almost done with her preparations. Master Du had already set up the altar and prepared the offerings for the Grim Reaper. He put on his robe and lit 3 incense sticks before he started to chant. He Qing stood aside quietly. She did not understand what Master Du was chanting and she did not care about it. All she wanted was a result. A strong wind blew in the night and extinguished the incense sticks in Master Du's hands. Master Du lit the incense sticks again and continued to chant. This time, the wind that blew from the void was even stronger, blowing the offerings to the ground. Master Du's expression changed completely. He respectfully bowed 3 times to the altar before walking in front of He Qing. "Madam He, as you can see, Death doesn't want to see you." Although He Qing did not know what happened, she saw the offerings being blown away by the strange wind. She said coldly, "Death doesn't want to see me?" Master Du did not say anything. He had made it very obvious. He Qing's expression changed as she thought of her lover who could not stand up anymore. When she thought about how he would leave her soon, He Qing felt that she could not bear it. She suddenly sneered, "She doesn't want to see me? Isn't Death supposed to pick up the dead? Then I'll ask her to pick you up." She waved her hand behind her, and a few well-built men dragged a person forward. This person was a homeless man she had found by the roadside. Master Du had already guessed He Qing's plan. His expression changed and he looked at He Qing as if she was a lunatic. "Madam He, this is a great sin. You can't do it. You'll have to pay for it in your next life." He Qing turned a deaf ear. "Sin? Haven't I, He Qing, committed enough sins in my life? If you want to pay me back in your next life, then we'll talk about it in your next life. I don't care what happens in the next life, but in this life, I can't lose him." Master Du looked at the crazy woman and regretted for the umpteenth time in his heart. Why did he set foot on this pirate ship? Now his heart was filled with despair. In this matter, he was in cahoots with He Qing. When the heavenly Tao came to settle the score, he would not be able to escape. He closed his eyes, not wanting to see what was about to happen. He couldn't stop her. He knew that if he didn't cooperate with He Qing, this crazy woman would really hurt his grandson. When Gu Shangyin saw the notebook light up and saw the locations and people displayed on it, a huge flame of anger rose in his heart. He Qing. She actually dared to do that. He Qing coldly looked at the person who had fallen to the ground and was no longer breathing. Fresh blood flowed out from his body and meandered to her feet like an evil yet beautiful chain. Suddenly, a strong wind blew in the quiet darkness and the altar for death was blown to the ground. Master Du's face was filled with despair. Death is angry. Chapter 14:12. He Qing still looked indifferent, but the gun in her sleeve had its safety off, showing that she wasn't as calm as she appeared to be. A black figure appeared in the night sky. She was wearing a large black cloak and her face could not be seen clearly. The huge black scythe exuded a chilling aura under the moonlight. It was a summer night but everyone felt as if they had fallen into an ice cave. Master Du, the only one who could see her, knelt down immediately. He Qing guessed that the Grim Reaper had arrived from the reaction of the people around and Master Du's appearance. However, she could not see anything. She said loudly, "Death God, are you here, Death God?" The surroundings were silent. Even the bodyguards that He Qing brought along were all tall and strong. They were all like little quails at this moment. They could not wait to curl up into a ball and shiver. They only found a normal job as bodyguards. They did not say that they would have to face such a supernatural event. No one answered He Qing. He Qing suddenly walked towards Master Du. "Master Du, you have a way to see the Grim Reaper, right? Think of a way to let me see him too." He Qing said softly. Master Du shook his head in fear and did not dare to speak, because he could see that the Grim Reaper had appeared behind He Ching. However, He Ching did not know anything. She even took out her gun and pointed it at Master Du. "Quick! Otherwise, I'll send you to see him." "Let her see." Master Du was shivering when a cold female voice rang in his ears. If Master Du were to describe this voice, it would probably be like quenched ice. It would make people shiver uncontrollably. It turned out that the Grim Reaper was a female. Master Du thought in a daze and was shocked. He quickly opened his eyes and took out a yellow talisman paper from his arms. Then, he bit his middle finger and drew a mysterious rune on it. When the rune was formed, He Ching did not know if it was an illusion, but she felt that she seemed to see a golden light on it. Then, Master Du took the rune and stuck it on He Ching's eyes. When the rune came into contact with He Ching's eyes, it suddenly seemed to merge into her eyes and disappeared. At the same time, He Ching realized that the world in her eyes had changed. She turned around and was shocked by the figure in front of her. A dark figure exuding an eerie cold aura was standing very close to him. Subconsciously, He Ching took a few steps back. She looked at the figure in front of her. His appearance was exactly the same as the legendary death of the underworld. Behind her, the homeless man who had just died was looking at her with hatred. It was his soul. No matter how bold He Ching was, she was still a little fearful after encountering such a situation. But she didn't show it on her face. She looked at Gu Shengyin. "Are you the Grim Reaper? I want to ask you to do something for me. You can pay any price you want." She could see death, but her bodyguards couldn't. They looked at their boss speaking to the void with a serious face. If it were any other time, they would definitely find this scene a little funny, but at this moment, no one could laugh. Because it was truly terrifying. Gu Shengyin looked at He Ching coldly. He Ching only felt that the icy gaze was like an icicle, about to freeze her. Chapter 14:13. Then, He Ching heard an extremely cold voice coming from the opposite side. "Human, what right do you have to say such things?" It was an undisguised contempt, as if the other party was talking to an insignificant ant. Because of her family background and wealth, He Ching had never met anyone who dared to speak to her in such a manner. She instinctively felt displeased, but when she thought of the other party's identity, she suppressed her unwillingness. Yes, the other party was a deity. Everything she had was nothing in front of the other party. The deity's power was too strong. He Ching felt suffocated and regretted her decision to sit down for a moment. But the next moment, she thought of the man's weak appearance and her heart hardened again. She stared straight at Gu Shengyin. "Then I won't beg you. How about I threaten you directly? If you don't agree, I'll kill one person a day." Master Du almost fainted when he heard these words. How dare she say such things? Was she really not afraid of retribution? He Ching sneered. "I've looked for countless masters to tell my fortune. In this life, my destiny is extremely rich and I'll live a long life. So what if I kill someone in front of you? The Grim Reaper can't do anything to me, right?" She had made a lot of preparations during this period. At least she knew that her life was extremely good, so no matter what happened, she would be able to turn misfortunes into blessings. This was because she was protected by the golden light of Narrate. For someone like her, even a deity would not dare to go against the heavenly Tao and do anything to her. This was also the reason why she was so fearless. As for the next life, she had once thought that her next life might be very miserable. But what did it matter? She was only He Ching in this life. It was enough for her to live well in this life. Who would care about the next life? Gu Shengyin said, "Your merit in this life is accumulated from the good deeds you did in your previous life. Why do you not care about the good fortune?" She did not seem to care about He Ching's threat at all. He Ching naturally heard it and said impatiently, "What I want to do is my own business. You just have to promise me that you won't let him die." Master Du deeply regretted that he had said those words when He Ching came to find him. He Ching's actions were simply courting death. The Grim Reaper couldn't do anything to her in this life, But what about after she died? After her death, her soul would belong to the underworld. At that time, if the Grim Reaper wanted to deal with her, it would be a piece of cake. Gu Shengyin looked at her and said, "Life has its own destiny. No one can save him." He Qing said sternly, "You're lying." Master Du said that as long as you're willing, you don't have to take away his soul. Master Du could feel the cold gaze on him. He could not help but shrink back. At this moment, he was already thinking about how he would die and come back to life after falling into the underworld. Gu Shengyin did not even look at He Qing. She turned and left. Life and death have their own destiny. The heavens will not spare anyone. Her meaning was clear. She couldn't save him. Even if she could not risk being punished by the heavens to save him. He Qing's heart hardened. She pulled the trigger and shot directly at Gu Shengyin. This time, Master Du fainted directly. However, in He Qing's eyes, those bullets passed through the Grim Reaper's body and hit the opposite wall. The other party did not even want to lower himself to her level and disappeared in an instant. Chapter 14:14. He Qing felt despair. For the first time, she felt powerless. But she wasn't the only one. As the Grim Reaper, Gu Shengyin couldn't do anything when she saw Qiao Zhihe's death approaching. The only thing Gu Shengyin could do was to spend more time with Qiao Zhihe in the last 2 months. Every time she went to see Qiao Zhihe, she could see his happy smile. She thought that she should be Qiao Zhihe's best friend in this life. Qiao Zhihe wasn't introverted, but he tended to be quiet. When he had nothing to do, he would travel alone with his drawing board to find inspiration. From Gu Shengyin's observation, she was likely to be one of Qiao Zhihe's best friends. Sometimes, Gu Shengyin would look at him from afar without showing herself. She watched him draw for free on this drawing board in the square where there were many children and adults' windmills. But he never drew portraits. Gu Shengyin saw that he had studied portraits for so many years, but she had never seen him draw portraits except for the copies in the classroom. Some people said that portraits were Qiao Zhihe's shortcoming. He knew that he wasn't good at it, so he never touched it. But Gu Shengyin didn't think so. Perhaps in her eyes, her family members were always the best. She felt that Qiao Zhihe must have his reasons for not drawing portraits. It wasn't that he couldn't draw well. Another month passed. There was still a month before Qiao Zhihe's death. And that man's condition was getting worse. He Qing's patience seemed to have reached its limit. People started to die in the city. It wasn't an accident. The murderer didn't have a target. It seemed that he would kill when he wanted to. There wasn't a high level of modus operandi, but the police couldn't find the murderer. Every time they investigated a case, they couldn't find any key clues. It was as if something had erased those clues from their minds. Gu Shengyin felt a chill in her heart. Because of He Qing's fate, she couldn't die. She couldn't be imprisoned. She couldn't be caught. What about others? Those who were waiting for a hot meal after work died innocently in He Qing's hands. Yes, those names were recorded in Gu Shengyin's record book. It showed that their lifespans ended on that day. Gu Shengyin might be able to comfort herself that even without He Qing's actions, they might still have died from a fall or a car accident. However, Gu Shengyin found it ridiculous. No matter how she looked at it, those people seemed to be paying for something. This was because Gu Shengyin had clearly seen the changes in He Qing's record book when she made her move. Some people's fates changed with her actions. The power of virtue in He Qing's body was also slowly decreasing. However, at this rate, she could still be free and unfettered for countless years before the golden light of virtue disappeared. Over the course of countless years, who knew how many more souls would have died under her hands? The most hateful thing was that every time He Qing killed a person, she would arrogantly write a sentence with blood, "Salute to the Grim Reaper." The police thought that it was a declaration made by the criminal. They thought that it was a provocation to the police. But it wasn't. It was He Qing's provocation to the Grim Reaper. On this day, when Gu Shengyin went to visit Qiao Zhihe, she saw him sitting on the bed alone. Chapter 14-15. Even when he saw Gu Xingyin's arrival, he didn't show much joy. Sister Death, you can see a person's lifespan, right? Qiao Zhihe asked. Gu Xingyin's heart skipped a beat, but she nodded lightly. Qiao Zhihe's face showed a dazed expression. One of my senior brothers, a very talented person. He had already received an admission notice from Songlin Country's Royal Academy this year, but when he returned home last night, he was shot. Gu Xingyin lowered her eyes. She knew that boy. She had gone to fetch him last night. The very cheerful and bright young man was beside her, crying as he looked at his own body. She had asked him to take a look at his parents. That person kept crying that he was unfilial and that he had let down his parents. Gu Xingyin looked at the record book in her hand. Actually, that person shouldn't have died yesterday. Originally, he should have gone abroad to study, then returned to his country and become a somewhat famous modern artist. He should have died at the age of 40 from liver cancer. But He Qing made a move. Just like she said, she would kill one person a day without a goal until the death god compromised. The power of merit in her body was protecting her. Every time she killed someone, her merit would decrease by 1. The power of merit that was originally enough to protect her in this lifetime was slowly decreasing. According to her current squandering, it was very likely that it could only protect her for 3 more years. But in 3 years, how many people would die by her hands? Gu Shengyin didn't reflect on the underworld. But in the eyes of the underworld's gods, all of this was nothing. In the lives of mortals, even if this lifetime was over, there would still be a next lifetime. In their eyes, this He Qing was so arrogant now. After she died, she would naturally pay back all the sins on her body. And for those who died by her hands and didn't get to enjoy their lives, the heavenly Tao would naturally compensate them in the next lifetime. So, this was all a cycle. In the hearts of the gods who didn't have emotions and desires, this wasn't a big deal. But Gu Shengyin couldn't bear it. She came to see Qiao Zhihe today to say goodbye to him. Then Big Sister Death, my parents. How long can they live? Qiao Zhihe was silent for a long time before he asked carefully. Gu Shengyin paused for a moment before replying, the lifespan of a mortal is a heavenly secret. It cannot be revealed casually. Qiao Zhihe was somewhat disappointed. Gu Shengyin thought of what she was going to do and said to Qiao Zhihe, don't think too much. Your parents are kind people. They will have a happy life. Qiao Zhihe's eyes lit up. Gu Shengyin looked into his eyes and her expression softened. But Qiao Zhihe couldn't see it. He could only hear the other party saying softly, you too, little crane. You will become a very famous painter and live a peaceful and wealthy life. Gu Shengyin suddenly stood up and said to Qiao Zhihe, I will be staying in the underworld for a long time. I have some things to take care of, so I won't be back for a long time. Qiao Zhihe was a bit disappointed, but he still nodded. He always knew that he and Big Sister Death were people from 2 different worlds. He looked at the other party's back. A pair of magnificent black wings stretched out and she disappeared into the darkness. He didn't know that this would be the last time he saw her in this life. Chapter 14-16. Host, have you really thought it through? The system asked. Gu Shengyin smiled and said, of course. She paused for a moment and said, I guess I can't be a qualified god anymore. I can't watch those living humans die. Even if they have reincarnation and afterlife, they won't be the same person in this life, right? The system said, Host, not all gods are like this. It's just that in this world, even the heavenly axiom isn't perfect. The system only dared to say something like this because it was outside the rules. Otherwise, it would definitely be noticed by the heavenly axiom. Gu Shengyin looked at the unchanging sky of the underworld and said to the system, I'm sorry. She knew that her decision was a little capricious. The mission in this world wasn't difficult, but she didn't know if the mission could be considered completed. The system comforted her. It's okay, host. As long as you're happy. Gu Shengyin, she didn't know why, but the originally serious atmosphere made her feel like laughing because of the system's comforting words. She thought that the system she met was probably the most tolerant, gentle, and good-tempered system in the world. She chose a place. Yes, it was in the underworld, under the tree where she often sat in a daze. The fiery red maple tree rustled and 2 leaves fell on her shoulders. The red and black contrasted with each other, creating a stunning beauty. Gu Shengyin had already closed her eyes. She placed her hand on the record book in her hand. Her spiritual power entered a very mysterious space through the record book. It was a void, and the darkness was filled with threads of light of all sizes. Some of these threads were thick, some thin, and all of them had different colors. This was the light of destiny of everyone in the record book. Gu Shengyin casually picked up a thread, and a string of information flowed into her mind. Lu Yuan, male, lived a mediocre life, died at the age of 58. She casually let go of the thread and released her spiritual power. She began to search for her target among the thousands of threads. Found it. She focused her gaze, and an illusory giant palm of light behind her grabbed into the darkness. When it came out, there were 2 more threads of light in its hand. There was a huge difference between the 2 rays of light. A very weak blue light flashed. The light was very dim, as if it could be extinguished at any moment. The other was an extremely thick and dazzling golden beam of light. The golden light made many of the surrounding thin threads dim. The owners of these 2 rays of light were called Qiao Zhihe and He Qing. What Gu Shengyin wanted to do today was to defy the will of the heavens. Didn't He Qing use her golden light of virtue to do whatever she wanted? Then she would take away her merit and see what else she could rely on to show off. As for Qiao Zhihe, in any case, she had already defied the mandate of heaven. It was impossible for her to escape the punishment of the heavenly Tao. In that case, it wouldn't be a big deal to defy it one more time. She held the 2 rays of light in her left and right hands, and then a powerful force began to seep into their fates bit by bit. It was not difficult for Qiao Zhihe to do so. Gu Shengyin did not spend much effort to erase the fate inscription on it. However, it was very troublesome for He Qing. Gu Shengyin could even feel that after her spiritual power entered He Qing's light of destiny, it was as if she had fallen into a swamp. It was very difficult for her to move forward. Chapter 14-17. Gu Shengyin knew that it was the merit that was stopping her from moving forward. In fact, the heavenly axiom was involved as well. Deep within her soul, she could hear the rumbling of thunder. That was the heavenly Tao's doing to stop her. However, she had already come this far. How could Gu Shengyin give up? She gave a cold harumph, and a soul power that was even stronger than that of the Grim Reaper burst forth, destroying all obstructions like crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. She forcefully erased the mark on the light of destiny. It was a power that belonged to her own soul. Then, she wrote a new mark on the golden pillar of light word by word: Qiao Zhihe, male, famous painter. Wealthy and peaceful for life. Died at age 80. On the other thin line, He Qing's name appeared. He Qing, female, committed countless evil deeds, died at age 31. Gu Shengyin was practically forced out. She looked at the sky above her. The sky of the netherworld, which had always been calm and cold, was filled with dark clouds and thunder. It was as though something was erupting with a powerful rage. Gu Shengyin knew that the heavenly Tao was angry. However, what did that matter? Didn't the heavenly Tao only recognize fate? She had already done what she wanted to do. Fresh blood trickled down from the corners of her mouth. It was as though a raging fire was burning within her body. It was also as though a cold winter wind was slicing her internal organs. That was the heavenly Tao punishing the Grim Reaper for daring to defy it. Gu Shengyin sensed her life force and power flowing away rapidly. She closed her eyes in exhaustion. System, leave this world. At the same time, Qiao Zhihe and He Qing both sensed that something was amiss. It was as though something had quietly left their bodies. Qiao Zhihe looked at the drop of red paint on the drawing paper and pursed his lips. Then, he threw the drawing, which was almost completed, into the waste paper basket. He Qing, who was standing guard before the man's window, received a call from the police. Without the power of merit, her crude methods of committing crimes could not be concealed. He Ching was taken away by the police. But before they could interrogate him, the police car carrying the most important suspect in the serial murder case was involved in a car accident. The most surprising thing was that the police officers in the car were only hurt by love, but the female suspect died on the spot. Later, the evidence was conclusive. Those cases were all committed by this woman. When the public found out about it, they all said that this was retribution. This person had committed too many sins. Even the heavens could not bear to watch anymore. Qiao Zhihe also saw the news. When he saw it, the first thing he thought of was to share it with Sister Death. But he hadn't seen Sister Death in a long time. Sister Death said that she had something important to do in the underworld and would not be back for a long time. But how long would it take? It was the 14th of July, the day when the gates of hell would open. However, very few people in the city believed this person. The light turned green. Qiao Zhihe was walking on the sidewalk. He was going to the paint shop across the street to buy a few boxes of his usual pigments. He turned around and saw that a car's brakes seemed to have malfunctioned. The car was speeding toward him at a speed that he could not avoid. It's over. At that moment, he was thinking that he would be able to see Sister Death. But for some unknown reason, just as the car was about to make contact with him, the car's tires suddenly skidded. It made a turn and charged toward the green belt beside him. Qiao Zhihe was not hurt at all. However, when he looked at the car, he felt as if something had left his body for a moment. 8 o'clock. There will be more in this world. Good night, everyone. Chapter 14:18. The driver was also fine. When he climbed out of the car and saw the unscathed Qiao Zhihe, his expression was as if he was about to cry. He was scared half to death just now. If he ran the red light and killed someone, he would have no hope in this life. Fortunately, God protected him. He ignored Qiao Zhihe's refusal and stuffed a large sum of money into his mouth, saying that if Qiao Zhihe didn't accept it, his heart would feel uneasy. Qiao Zhihe finally accepted the money and put this matter to the back of his mind. Many years later, Qiao Zhihe became a very famous painter. He was very young, didn't have any bad habits, and kept himself clean. He also had a face that could be called a male god. Most importantly, he didn't have a girlfriend. Such a man was simply the dream lover of countless women. His paintings could be sold for a very high price, but still, no one had ever seen him paint any portraits. His competitors attacked him, and his admirers offered him tens of millions of dollars to paint his portrait, but he never paid any attention to them. No one knew that in his villa, there was a room that only he could open. When the light was turned on, one could see a full easel. The contents of these easels, at a glance, could be seen to be the same person. Black cloak, black scythe, unable to see the face clearly. This image was the majority. And a few of the portraits had a delicate beauty, but her hair and pupil color were somewhat different from humans. In a few of the portraits, this person even had a pair of gorgeous black wings on her body. These portraits were vivid and lifelike. The movements and expressions of the people in the portraits, and even the eyes, seemed to be transmitted through the painting paper. As long as one saw these paintings, one would know that the famous painter Qiao Zhihe was not good at painting people. It was absolutely nonsense. The level of these paintings even surpassed several of his works that were sold for sky-high prices. Qiao Zhihe stretched out his hand and gently stroked a painting. His movements were very gentle, so gentle that it was as if he wasn't stroking a painting at all, but the owner of the painting. Death's sister. Qiao Zhihe, who had grown into a mature man, softly called her. 11 years, 3 months, and 13 days. You said that you had things to do and wouldn't come for a long time. But that's really too long. He looked at the paintings with a gentle gaze. Actually, I decided to draw because of you. I want to draw your appearance, and your movements. Everything is on the drawing board. Of course, only I could see it. The first person I want to draw is you. That's why before I have absolute confidence, I've never drawn a portrait because I'm afraid that the work I draw will tarnish your image. Now, I'm able to draw something that satisfies me. I want to show you my work. But, Sister Death, why don't you come back and see me? Since 11 years ago, no, since before that. In his heart, he had been thinking that when he could draw her perfectly, he would bring his work to confess to her. He was a painter, so he confessed in the form of a painter. He infused all his emotions and desires into these paintings. One only needed to take a look to know how much affection he had for the people on it. Chapter 14:19. It was just that he had painstakingly studied the art of painting, and when he finally felt that he could show it off, the person who watched him painting was no longer there. Chao Zhihe stayed in the room alone for a long time. This was his habit. He would probably stay here alone for a while every week. Finally, he sighed softly, locked the door again, and went out. The weather this afternoon was very good. Chao Zhihe put on his hat and went out with his drawing board. He planned to go to a famous lake view park in the city today, hoping to find some inspiration. It wasn't the weekend and it was the afternoon, so there weren't many people in the park. Chao Zhihe had just sat down when an old man beside him said, "Young man, are you interested in having your fortune told?" Only then did Chao Zhihe notice that there was a white cloth at the old man's feet. On it was written, "Divine Fortune Telling." However, he didn't believe in such things, so he shook his head and refused. The old man looked at him and didn't force him. Another half an hour passed, but no one came over. Perhaps the old man felt bored, so he said, "Young man, since I have nothing to do, how about I tell your fortune for you?" He seemed to be afraid that Chao Zhihe would refuse, so he said, "This old man is just bored today, so I came out for a walk. It's fate that I met you, so I won't take your fortune-telling fee." Chao Zhihe felt that it wasn't good to disappoint an old man who had called him twice, so he put down the pen in his hand and walked in front of the old man. "Do I need to do anything?" he asked. The old man shook his head and looked at him carefully. With this look, he frowned. The glabella is connected to the glabella, but the chi is scattered and not gathered. This is clearly the sign of a short life. That's not right. He looked at Chao Zhihe as if he had seen something extremely rare. Chao Zhihe felt a little uncomfortable being looked at like this, so he asked what was wrong. The old man looked at him and said, "Looking at your face, it's clearly the sign of a short life. However, I don't know which powerful person went against the heavenly Tao and changed your fate, forcibly changing your fate to one of good fortune and longevity. Moreover, this fate was clearly taken from someone else. However, this young man didn't have any evil creatures on him, which meant that the person who took it wasn't a good person." When Chao Zhihe heard his words, he was a little unhappy. He took out a stack of money from his wallet and handed it to the old man. "Old man, since you're a fortune teller, it's better to say something auspicious. Otherwise..." As soon as the old man heard this, he knew what he was thinking. It was obvious that he didn't trust him. He didn't take Chao Zhihe's money either. He coldly snorted and said, "Young man, do you think I'm a swindler who only knows how to run his mouth? According to what I've seen, when you were 17 years old, there was a great calamity in your life that should have taken your life. It should be the middle of July when the yin qi is at its heaviest. Think about it. Did you encounter something thrilling but didn't lose your life?" Hearing the old man's words, Chao Zhihe seemed to recall the time when he was almost hit by a car. In his heart, he was already starting to believe it. How could there be such a coincidence in this world? Looking at his expression, the old man knew that he had guessed correctly. He continued, "I don't know what kind of person would actually risk being punished by the heavenly Tao to defy the heavens and change your fate. This old man is sincerely convinced by such means." Chapter 14:20. When Chao Zhihe heard this, his heart trembled for some reason. "Old sir, is it very difficult to change one's fate against the heavens?" he asked. The old man looked at him and said, "Is it? Changing a person's innate fate into another, allowing a person who was supposed to be dead to live again and live a better life than most people. Do you think it's difficult?" After that, he said to himself, Huaxia is really full of crouching tigers and hidden dragons. I used to think that I was already one of the best, but I didn't expect there to be such a master. This is simply a supernatural power. What a ghostly divine ability! Qiao Zhihe's body shook. He suddenly remembered that one night many years ago, Sister Death brought him to the top of a mountain. There, he saw the most beautiful night scene in his life. At that time, Sister Death asked him, "If you knew that you were going to die one day, what would you think?" How did he answer at that time? He said that he was not reconciled. He remembered that she didn't say anything at that time. A few days later, she told him, "You will become a very famous painter and live a peaceful and rich life." Why didn't he think about it at that time? If there was really nothing, why would Sister Death suddenly ask such a question and emphasize such words? At this time, the old man opposite him asked, "Young man, do you know the master who changed your fate? Can you introduce me to such a master? I must pay him a visit." Wait, no. After doing such a thing, the heavenly axiom will not let him go. The heavenly axiom will not let him go. This sentence was like a thunderbolt, ringing in Qiao Zhihe's mind. He heard his own dry voice. "Sir, if I forcefully change my fate, that person, what will happen to him?" Qiao Zhihe thought that his face must be very ugly now, because the old man opposite him looked at him with sympathy and worry. He said, "Changing your fate against the heavenly axiom will destroy all your cultivation and become disabled. In the worst case, you will be turned into ashes." Qiao Zhihe's vision went dark. "I have something very important to do in the underworld. I may not come to see you for a long time." So, the so-called important matter was actually like this? Qiao Zhihe did not ask what would happen if the one who changed someone's fate was not a human, but a god of death. He was afraid of hearing the consequences that he didn't want to hear. With a dazed expression, he packed up his things and walked back. Do not ask, do not listen. In that case, he could treat it as if Sister Death had only received some punishment, and she had only returned to the underworld to recuperate or do something else. As long as he waited patiently, he would be able to wait for her. He did not see the pitiful gaze of the old man behind him. In his entire life, Qiao Zhihe had never met the person he was waiting for. Just like what Sister Death had said, he lived a peaceful, prosperous, and healthy life. His life had been smooth sailing. The only thing that puzzled people was that he had never married. It was not strange for an artist not to be married, but what was strange was that this master of the painting world did not even have a confidant in his life. On Qiao Zhihe's 79th birthday, he seemed to have sensed something and held an art exhibition. This art exhibition caused a sensation in the entire painting world. Because this was Master Qiao Zhihe's only portrait art exhibition, and the theme of the art exhibition was only one person. Countless portraits of the god of death filled the art exhibition hall, but no one felt that it was gloomy or terrifying. Under the painting of this master, the god of death had an exquisite and perfect face. Although the expression was cold, deep in the eyes, there was a warmth and gentleness that belonged only to him. Even people who did not understand painting could see the feelings of the painter towards the person in the painting at a glance. This person must be Master Qiao's lover, right? Although they did not know why he set the image of his lover as the god of death, it did not look out of place. Instead, it added a strange sense of beauty. Someone wanted to buy the paintings at a high price, but they were all rejected by Qiao Zhihe. Ever since his birthday, his body began to weaken rapidly. He probably knew that he would not live for long, so he made up his mind to reveal his true feelings to the world before he died. In the 8th month of the year 2393 of the Huaxia calendar, the famous painter Qiao Zhihe passed away at home. Before he died, he made a will that all the assets and paintings under his name, except for the portraits, would be donated to welfare organizations. As for the beautiful paintings that attracted the interest of countless people, they were cremated with his body and no longer remained in the world. Chapter 1421. This was a world that belonged to summoners. Every child in the Kingdom of Warcraft would enter the Empire's public temple of summoning at the age of 5 to awaken their talent. The test results were divided into 3 levels: low level, mid-level, and high-level. Level 1 to 3 summoners were low-level summoners. Such people may not be able to become a summoner in their lifetime and summon their own magical beast. And even if low-level summoners were lucky enough to summon a magical beast, it was likely to be an ordinary rabbit or turtle, a useless magical beast of little value. Level 4 to 6 summoners were called mid-level summoners. They could summon magical beasts corresponding to their own level. Intermediate summoners were the backbone of any force, and they were also the largest group of summoners. And once the talent was above level 7, they belonged to the high-level summoner camp. High-level summoners were divided into 3 levels: level 7, level 8, and level 9. The higher the summoner's level, the higher the level of the magical beast they could summon. Level 9 summoners could even summon kings of level 9 magical beasts like the iron-armored dragon. But in the whole kingdom of Warcraft, there were very few people who could become high-level summoners. Every time a person with high-level summoner talent appeared, they would be hunted down by all the major forces without exception. Behind every high-level summoner, there was a magical beast with strong fighting power. Such a person deserved to be treated with respect by any force. This was the general background of the mission world that Gu Shengyin came to this time. The mission of this plane was a little different from the previous ones. In the past, the mission characters that she entered were much higher than ordinary people from the beginning. They really explained what it meant to be favored by the heavens. But this world was a little different. This was a female lead who walked the path of trash. Of course, the female lead, Yuan Tianyi, was not a real trash, but a fake trash with the bloodline of ancient summoners. Before Yuan Tianyi's bloodline awakened, in everyone's eyes, she was a trash who couldn't even be considered a low-level summoner. But after her bloodline awakened, those so-called geniuses, in front of her, were not even worthy of carrying her shoes. What was the biggest difference between the ancient summoners and the summoners of today's kingdom of Warcraft? As everyone knew, every summoner could only draw a summoning spell formation at the age of 14 and summon a contracted magical beast that was compatible with their soul. And the magical beast that was summoned would be the summoner's lifelong companion, and it would also be the summoner's only companion. Every summoner could only have one contracted magical beast. But in the glorious era of the ancient summoners, it wasn't like this. As long as the summoner's soul power was strong enough, she could summon magic beasts without limit. This meant that they could have more than one magic beast. This was the difference. Even if I can't compare to you in terms of numbers, I will still beat you to death one by one. Moreover, there were many exceptional geniuses among the ancient summoners. In terms of talent, those so-called geniuses in the current magical beasts continent could not compare to the ancient geniuses. According to the development of the original plot, Yuan Tianyi was a direct descendant of the Yuan clan of the Dragon Phoenix Empire. Due to her poor talent, she had always been treated coldly by her family. When he was 14 years old, his bloodline awakened, and he successfully summoned the holy beast that had disappeared from the magical beast continent for thousands of years, shocking everyone. After that, he cheated all the way, smoothly killing monsters and leveling up, and finally reached the peak of his life. Chapter 1422. But if that was the case, Gu Shengyin wouldn't have come. Yes. Yuan Tianyi, who was supposed to go all the way to the top, was killed by a cannon fodder who couldn't even be considered a supporting role. Yuan Tianyi was tested to have inferior talent at the age of 5. She might not even be able to summon an ordinary magical beast. Her family had always regarded her as an abandoned child. Naturally, she couldn't receive good treatment. When she was 10 years old, she had a serious illness. That illness was so dangerous that it almost took her life. A little girl who had received her kindness took the risk of leaving the Yuan residence and found a pharmacist for her. Her life was finally saved. However, this little girl was stopped by a young miss from a side branch of the Yuan residence, Yuan Qin. Yuan Qin was born in a remote branch of the Yuan residence. Because she was tested to have intermediate talent at the age of 5, she was taken back by the main family. She studied with the young masters and young misses of the main family, as well as other talented young masters and young misses of the other branches. Although she was also a young miss, there was no doubt that in terms of status, she couldn't be compared with the young masters and young misses of the main branch. So even if she was a summoner with intermediate talent, compared to others, her treatment was very good. But compared to those young masters and young misses of the main branch, it was like the difference between heaven and earth. Was Yuan Qin jealous? Of course, she was jealous. However, she didn't dare to vent her anger on the young masters and young ladies of the Gen family, because their background was much stronger than her, who was only from a branch family. In such a case, as a direct descendant of the main branch, Yuan Tianyi, who occupied the Tian name, but only had inferior talent, became the target of her venting. In Yuan Qin's view, Yuan Tianyi was so good. She was born a young miss of the main branch, which was an honor that many people couldn't ask for. But she occupied such a good position, but she was just a waste. Yuan Qin thought countless times that if she was in Yuan Tianyi's position, it would be good. Then she would also be a young miss of the main branch. She wouldn't have to force a smile in front of those young masters and young misses of the main branch, just to fight for the resources that fell between their fingers. The more she thought about it, the more she disliked Yuan Tianyi. Yuan Tianyi's temperament was not cowardly, but after all, the situation was stronger than the person. In some aspects, she did not compete with Yuan Qin. In Yuan Qin's eyes, she became the spokesperson for cowardice and did not know how to resist. The more it was like this, the more she wanted to trample Yuan Tianyi under her feet and enjoy the pleasure of comparing the noble young miss of the direct line to dirt. So when she saw the little girl coming out of Yuan Tianyi's courtyard, she stopped her, and when she knew the little girl's intention, she blocked her way. As a young miss of a branch family with some status, it was as easy as flipping her hand for Yuan Qin to imprison the whereabouts of a little servant girl. The little girl was being watched by the guards around her, and Yuan Tianyi, who was in the courtyard, lost her life because of the continuous high fever that couldn't be relieved. When she opened her eyes again, it was Gu Shengyin. Gu Shengyin felt sore all over. She tried to sit up, but found that her whole body was soft and she couldn't summon any strength. Although the high fever had subsided, her body was still very weak. She propped herself up and poured herself a cup of cold water on the only table in the house. The taste of the tea was not good. Thinking about it, an unfavored young miss would not have any good tea here. After drinking a large cup of tea, Gu Shengyin felt that her dry throat was relieved. She began to call the system. Chapter 14:23. System, Draw a Skill. Feeling the weakness in her body, this was the first time Gu Shengyin wished that she could get a good skill. Otherwise, she would have to wait until she was 14 years old before she could awaken the ancient summoner bloodline and summon the sacred beast. 4 years wasn't an easy time. Ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining the Goddess of Nature's Creation skill. Creation? Gu Shengyin frowned. She thought for a bit, then reached out her pale and slender right hand and activated the power of her soul. A faint green light rose from her palm. When the light condensed, a small green fruit appeared in her hand. Gu Shengyin's eyes showed a hint of a smile as she put the fruit into her mouth. The moment the green fruit entered her mouth, it turned into a warm juice and flowed down Gu Shengyin's throat. This body was a bit weak because of the high fever, and her mind was instantly cleared. Finally, she was not that weak anymore. Gu Shengyin smiled with satisfaction. This green fruit was something that had never appeared on this continent before. Green fruit, a fruit that could quickly quench thirst and replenish stamina. In the Western fantasy world, it had always been the favorite of the mercenaries. And when the system did not stop her when she created this small fruit, Gu Shengyin confirmed one of her guesses. Ever since her soul became stronger and stronger, the restrictions and senses of the world's laws on her had decreased. If at the beginning, she used abilities that did not belong to this world, or even took out things that did not belong to this world, the system would definitely remind her. And the world's laws would also notice. What did this mean? It meant that as she became stronger, the influence of these worlds on her became smaller and smaller. In fact, she could even slightly break the rules of the world. For Gu Shengyin, this was good news. She sat quietly for a while, and when she recovered, she felt that her body was a bit uncomfortable. This body had previously experienced a fever. Her body had long been soaked in her own sweat countless times. Now that she was sitting in the room with the windows open and the cold wind blowing, there was an indescribable feeling of stickiness and discomfort. Gu Shengyin walked out of the house. Unsurprisingly, there wasn't even a servant in this small courtyard. As the young miss of the Yuan clan's direct line of descent, she didn't even have a servant in her courtyard. This was against the rules. However, who would be willing to come to a young lady who was born with inferior talent with no future to speak of? Those stewards also turned a blind eye to such matters. They only needed to curry favor with people who needed to be on their good side. Gu Shengyin knew that in a family like the Zhen family where power and benefits were paramount, if you didn't have enough power, you wouldn't have any right to speak. Her footsteps did not stop as she walked towards a certain place. When the head steward of the backyard saw Gu Shengyin, he was stunned for a moment before he realized who she was. "Third Miss, why are you here today?" No one who could become the chief steward was a fool. Even if he looked down on this third young miss in his heart, he would not show the slightest mistake on his face. Only those small stewards with low statuses would seek death in all sorts of ways, fully demonstrating their IQ that needed to be recharged. Chapter 14:24. When Gu Shengyin heard his words, she knew that the person in front of her was a smart person. She liked dealing with smart people the most. She raised her face and smiled at the steward. "I've been feeling a little uncomfortable these past 2 days. Today, I finally felt better, so I wanted to see if there was any hot water here for me to take a bath." When the steward heard this, his expression changed greatly. He said to Gu Shengyin, "How could you trouble Third Miss to personally come over for such a young lady?" When he said this, he saw Gu Shengyin's eyes that seemed to be smiling yet not smiling. His heart suddenly trembled. That's right, if there were servants by her side, how could this Third Miss personally come over? His tone changed, and he quickly said, "Does Third Miss want to come in and drink some tea? I'll send someone to bring hot water to Third Miss's courtyard. In addition, I'll send 2 clever maids to Third Miss's courtyard, okay?" "No need." Gu Shengyin looked at the steward and said with a smile, "Thank you for your trouble, steward. It's just that I like peace and quiet, so I don't need 2 more people to disturb me. If steward has the heart, you only need to send someone to bring fresh and slightly warm food to my courtyard every day, as well as clean hot water at sunset every day." The steward felt that although she was only a 10-year-old little girl, this Third Miss's eyes seemed to be able to see through all of his thoughts. This Third Miss, who had always been ignored by everyone, didn't seem to be that simple. While he was still quietly thinking, Gu Shengyin had already lifted her leg and was preparing to leave. She had already said what she wanted to say. Presumably, with this steward's character, he would naturally satisfy all of her requests. The steward narrowed his eyes as he watched the little figure leave. Although the figure was thin and weak, her back was straight. In a trance, the steward felt that he actually felt an aura from this Third Miss that even the recognized genius, eldest young master Yuan Tianqin, couldn't compare to. He shook his head with a smile, laughing inwardly at himself for being so muddle-headed today. He was actually shocked by a little girl. However, because of this, he kept an eye on Gu Shengyin and paid more attention to him. For the chief steward, this was just a matter of a few words. However, his casual words made Gu Shengyin's life much better. Soon, clean hot water was served. Gu Shengyin took a bath in a good mood. She had just changed her clothes and had not even dried her hair when she heard a familiar voice outside the courtyard. "Is Third Sister here?" This time, Gu Shengyin recognized who it was. She sat on the stool and wiped her hair with a dry handkerchief, completely ignoring her. That person didn't hear a reply and didn't leave. Instead, he pushed open the door without waiting for the owner for a long time. When she saw Gu Shengyin sitting on a chair and drying her hair, a trace of anger flashed across her face. Big Sister shouted so loudly outside the door, but Third Sister didn't even respond. "What a strong aura!" she sneered. Gu Shengyin looked at the girl in front of her. She looked like she was only 11 or 12 years old. She was clearly still at the age of naivety and romance, but her words and actions were like that of an old person. Using such a face with some baby fat to make a sneer wasn't intimidating at all. Instead, it was somewhat laughable. However, although it was laughable, when it was time to slap the face, it still had to be done. Gu Shengyin slowly put down the handkerchief in her hand. Her movements were obviously elegant. Chapter 14:25. Her actions seemed to irritate Yuan Qin again. Yuan Qin looked at Gu Shengyin's appearance, and her heart was simply flustered. Just like this. Although her talent was not bad, she knew that for the young masters and young ladies of the branch family, unless they were those with heaven-defying aptitudes and reached the advanced summoner realm, the rest were never taken seriously by the group of people of the direct line. Because this was the capital of the Dragon Phoenix Empire, and the Yuan family was a prominent family in the capital. The upbringing and etiquette that these young masters and young ladies of the direct line received since childhood was not something that the branch family descendants from a remote place could compare to. She even heard two young ladies of the direct line laugh at them as country bumpkins. For this reason, she worked hard to practice etiquette for several months, but at most she could only not lose face. Like Gu Shengyin, who made people feel that her every movement was pleasing to the eye, Yuan Qin could not do it no matter what. Why? She could not compare to those talented young ladies of the direct line, so be it. Why could she not even compare to Yuan Tianyi, this trash? Gu Shengyin very calmly looked at Yuan Qin's angry face that turned white. The more angry she was, the happier Gu Shengyin was. Although she often couldn't understand why some people would get angry over such insignificant things, she still couldn't understand. As if she thought that Yuan Qin was not angry enough, Gu Shengyin raised her face, and looked at Yuan Qin with a very innocent look. Sister Yuan Qin, I have been sitting here wiping my hair, and other than the sound of Big Black that Brother Tianheng raised next door in the courtyard, I did not hear any other sound. Yuan Qin's face turned from pale to ashen. The Big Black that Yuan Tianheng raised next door was a dog. This trash dared to call her a dog. She subconsciously reached out her hand, and a light yellow light burst out from her palm, directly hitting Gu Shengyin. This light ball looked small, but it was a martial skill in reality. If it hit Gu Shengyin, with her weak body, it was possible that she would directly vomit blood. When Yuan Qin shot, she didn't think that Yuan Tianyi, this waste, would be able to dodge. She was born with inferior talent. Even if she was given a martial skill, she would not be able to learn it in her lifetime. However, Gu Shengyin only took a small step forward and easily dodged Yuan Qin's angry attack. Yuan Qin raised her head and looked at Gu Shengyin in surprise. It was as if she was seeing her for the first time. How did you dodge? Gu Shengyin did not answer her question, but looked directly at Yuan Qin and said, Yuan Qin Jejie, Yuan Tianyi, no matter how bad I am still the Yuan family's upright young miss. The Zhen family had been taught for generations that siblings were not allowed to kill each other. Is Yuan Qin, Jejie not taking my Zhen family's rules seriously? Or do you not see yourself as a member of the Yuan family? Yuan Qin suddenly raised her head and stared at Gu Shengyin. Gu Shengyin did not evade her gaze and looked back at her calmly. Upon closer inspection, there seemed to be a hint of mockery in that gaze. She was looking down on her. Yuan Qin clearly read Gu Shengyin's meaning. There was something in her heart that was ready to move. Yuan Tianyi, this waste, was really an eyesore. She really wanted to get rid of her and never let her appear in front of her again. Just when she was about to lose control and make a move, Gu Shengyin's voice with a smile appeared in her ear. Yuan Qin Jejie, you must remember the Zhen family's rules. As if a basin of cold water was poured over her head. 8 o'clock ended. It's the last day of February. If you have a monthly ticket, don't waste it. Vote for Gao Lungji Lalala. Good night. Chapter 14:26. Yuan Qin suppressed the urge to hit her. She looked at Gu Shengyin and sneered, I didn't expect that the fever didn't make you stupid, but instead made you smarter. Gu Shengyin still had a smile on her face. Sister Yuan Qin, you flatter me. Things like cleverness can only be judged by comparison. After she finished speaking, She was satisfied to see that Yuan Qin's ashen face had a tendency to turn purple. Gu Shengyin said to the system, "System, according to this Yuan Qin's narrow-mindedness, how likely is it that she will be angered to death by me?" System, host, you've changed really. You're no longer the pure and unpretentious host that I know. Yuan Qin pinched the solid wood armrest so hard that a crack appeared. She said coldly, "Sister, you've become a lot sharper with your words. However, it's useless to only have a sharp mouth. At critical moments, it depends on talent. Am I right, sister?" She said this to annoy Gu Shengyin. However, the person opposite her acted as if she didn't hear anything and nodded repeatedly, "Sister Yuan Qin is right." Yuan Qin only felt that there was a burst of anger in her heart that couldn't be vented, which made her very uncomfortable. However, the next moment the other person said, "A talented and quiet genius like Brother Yuan Tianqin is a good example for us to learn from. If your talent isn't good enough, you have to spend more time cultivating. There won't be good results if you come out every day." Gotcha. The armrest on Yuan Qin's right, which had a crack, was completely broken. At this moment, Yuan Qin wished that the armrest under her hand was the trash Yuan Tianni. God knows how much she wanted to pinch her to death. Ah! Gu Shengyin jumped up in surprise and pointed at a piece of scrap solid wood in Yuan Qin's hand. Her shocked expression greatly satisfied Yuan Qin's vanity. She waved the thing in her hand in front of Gu Shengyin as if she was demonstrating her power. The threat in her eyes was very obvious. However, Gu Shengyin just looked at her bitterly and hatefully. "Sister Yuan Qin, whether you're successful in your cultivation or in a bad mood, why are you competing with a piece of wood? It's not like you don't know that I'm poor and can't be compared to you. You casually grabbed it and hurt yourself, but you destroyed my armrest. This. She looked very sad, and even her eyes were red. Anyone who walked in and saw Yuan Qin's dark face and the broken armrest in her hand, as well as Gu Shengyin's pale face and red eyes, would only have one thought in their mind: "What's wrong with you?" This Yuan Qin was looking for trouble. And she's already bullying her. When he came in, he had his own thoughts. He frowned. He didn't have any impression of the third sister's sister. But at the same time, he didn't have a good impression of this Miss Yuan Qin who came from a collateral family. "What are you doing?" When he spoke, Gu Shengyin noticed that there was a big black dog behind him, almost as tall as an adult's waist. She didn't know what breed the black dog was, but its hair was all black and shiny. Obviously, it was well taken care of. This was the big black dog that Gu Shengyin used to make Yuan Qin angry. Gu Shengyin secretly ridiculed in her heart. No matter how many worlds you cross, the aesthetic of human naming is the same. Chapter 14:27. Yuan Qin's heart skipped a beat when she saw Yuan Tianheng. Although both of them were intermediate summoners, Yuan Tianheng was the young master of the direct line. His father was the younger brother of the head of the family, and his grandfather was an elder of the Yuan family. In terms of status, she was far inferior to this young master in the Yuan family. She was about to say something when she saw Gu Shengyin take a step back. She seemed to be frightened by Yuan Tianheng. Her originally pale face was now drained of blood. Her hands were tightly grabbing her sleeves, and her eyes were drifting. She seemed to be very uneasy. Yuan Qin sneered in her heart. Yuan Tianni was so unpresentable. Yuan Tianheng didn't even say anything and she was already scared like this. Didn't she know that the Yuan family hated this kind of petty behavior the most? She felt relieved. She felt that Yuan Tianni, this idiot, had dug her own grave. She proudly glared at Gu Shengyin. When she was about to speak, she met Yuan Tianheng's cold eyes. There was no warmth in his eyes. She couldn't help but tremble. Then she heard Yuan Tianheng's cold voice, bullying the young miss of the direct line of the Yuan family. "Do you think there is no one in the direct line of the Yuan family?" Yuan Qin looked up in shock. What did this young master just say? He was protecting Yuan Tianni? When did Yuan Tianni and Yuan Tianheng have a relationship? She subconsciously refuted, "No, I didn't. Yuan Tianheng was too lazy to listen to her. Uncle Shui, tell her to scram. Yes. A gray-clothed figure appeared out of nowhere and grabbed Yuan Qin's collar. Yuan Qin didn't even have time to speak before she was grabbed and disappeared without a trace. Gu Shengyin, who watched from the beginning to the end, she liked this style. The room suddenly quieted down. Yuan Tianheng also looked at Gu Shengyin. Before Gu Shengyin could say anything, she met his disdainful gaze. As a direct line of the Yuan family, you actually live like this. You are really useless. Gu Shengyin. She wanted to take back her words. This person's mouth was really annoying. Yuan Tianheng looked at her again and said, if Blackie didn't like you, I wouldn't care about your business. Da Hei. Gu Shengyin couldn't help but look at the big dog that was almost as tall as her. What did this have to do with Da Hei? When the big dog saw Gu Shengyin looking at it, it thought that she wanted to play with it. It was obviously very happy. And so, Gu Shengyin was beautifully pounced on by a big black dog that was even bigger than her. Da Hei sniffed and licked her body. Obviously, it really liked her. Gu Shengyin tried to hold it in, but in the end, he couldn't hold it in anymore. He slapped Big Blackie on the head. Stop it. Da Hei looked at her with wet eyes. It was obviously very aggrieved, but it was very obedient and did not make trouble for her again. However, Gu Shengyin felt another burning gaze. She raised her head and met Yuan Tianheng's sparkling eyes. Yuan Tianheng was still expressionless, but Gu Shengyin seemed to hear a trace of excitement in his voice. How did you do it? Gu Shengyin didn't understand what he meant for a moment until she saw his eyes looking at her hand that was still on Da Hei's head. This guy, wasn't Da Hei his pet? Why was he looking at her with envy? She hesitated for a moment and said something that was very annoying. Probably. I was born with it. Chapter 14:28. Thus, on the first day Gu Shengyin came to this world, she successfully gained Yuan Qin's hatred and gained a friend. This friend was given to her by Yuan Tianheng himself. He probably really loved his dog, Big Black, so the person that Big Black liked was his friend. Gu Shengyin, who had been befriended. But when she thought about it carefully, as Yuan Tianyi living in the Yuan clan, becoming friends with Yuan Tianheng was not a bad thing. Gu Shengyin didn't know if it was because of the head steward's conscience or because of Yuan Tianheng, but she found that her life had become a lot better. Every day, there would be 3 sumptuous meals in exquisite food boxes delivered to her courtyard. Gu Shengyin requested it herself. She didn't like other people trespassing on her territory. On the second day after she came to this world, after asking for her permission, a large group of people dressed as craftsmen entered her courtyard. They only spent an afternoon to completely renovate her courtyard. Looking at the newly renovated courtyard, Gu Shengyin sighed with emotion. Finally, it looks like a living person. After everyone left, Gu Shengyin returned to her room. Her expression turned cold. It was obvious that these craftsmen were not the work of the head steward. He didn't need to rush to curry favor with a young lady who couldn't see a future. Then, it could only be Yuan Tianheng. It seemed that she had underestimated the status of a direct descendant of the Yuan clan. It was no wonder that Yuan Tianheng said those words when he first saw her. It was obvious that she, who was bullied by a branch family descendant, was really useless in his eyes. She thought of the gray-clothed figure beside Yuan Tianheng who threw Yuan Qin away. This was also one of the differences between a direct descendant and a branch family descendant. After the direct descendant of the Yuan clan had a talent test at the age of 5, the clan would assign a protector who was at least at the martial king realm to each of the promising direct descendants. These protectors were all nurtured by the Yuan clan and would directly establish a contract with their new master. From then on, they only needed to be loyal to their own little master. Even if the master and the head of the Yuan clan didn't agree, the protector only needed to follow the master's opinion. From the day he became the protector of the little master, he was no longer a member of the Yuan clan. He was only a trusted subordinate of the direct descendant, a martial king realm expert. The Yuan clan was really generous. Gu Shengyin sighed with emotion. In this world, the highest position. Summoners had the status. But aside from summoners and ordinary people, there was another profession: martial warriors. The status of a warrior was not comparable to that of a summoner, but high-level warriors were still respectable existences. Martial warriors were divided: warriors, martial masters, martial kings, martial emperors, and revered martial artists. The main reason why the status of a warrior was not higher than that of a summoner was that it was very difficult for a warrior to advance. A martial king realm warrior was already an extremely powerful warrior on the magical beast continent. However, a martial king expert, in terms of combat power, might only be equivalent to a 6th grade magical beast. As for martial emperors, they were already extremely powerful martial warriors in this continent. Even a high-level summoner would not dare to offend such a strong person. After all, in terms of individual combat ability, a high-level summoner might not necessarily be able to defeat a martial emperor warrior, because a martial emperor might not have the chance to attack a high-level summoner. Chapter 1429. However, although there are many high-level summoners in the magical beast continent, there are only a few martial kings. This is also the reason why summoners are able to seize the dominant position in this continent. Back to the topic. Although the Gen family is so generous, it's only for the direct descendants that they think have the potential to cultivate. For someone like Yuan Tianyi who doesn't have a future, the family naturally won't spend too much on her. What surprised Gu Shengyin was that it was impossible for the rest of the family to not know about such a big change on his side. But several days have passed, and no one has said anything. Although she knows this is normal, but there are no retards coming to fight, Gu Shengyin's heart actually feels a little uncomfortable. System Host, you may need to take medicine. Gu Shengyin is still sighing. The Gen family is worthy of being able to stand on this continent for thousands of years without falling. Look at this direct descendant. In Yuan Tianyi's memory, except for Yuan Qin, that miss from the collateral branch who would think of ways to make things difficult for her, she has never encountered any difficulties. Thinking about it, in these big families, whether it's the collateral branch or the direct descendant, the competition is very fierce. Who has the time to waste on cultivation and study to make things difficult for Yuan Tianyi, a waste destined to not be a threat to them? They say they are very busy and have no time. They, to put it nicely, don't hit people when they are down, but to put it bluntly, they are indifferent. Complete and utter indifference. Because Yuan Tianyi has no value, it's not worth their trouble at all. Although they won't hit people when they are down, but when Yuan Qin makes things difficult for Yuan Tianyi, no one reaches out a hand to help. They don't care whether Yuan Tianyi is dead or alive. But for Gu Shengyin, this kind of indifference is enough. She doesn't need those people's care. Moreover, this kind of straightforward indifference was much better than those hypocritical care. Even Yuan Qin's simple and crude way of looking for trouble makes Gu Shengyin feel a little cute, stupid to the point of being cute. Of course, no matter what, Yuan Qin killed the real Yuan Tianyi, this is a fact. Gu Shengyin will not be soft-hearted to repay her. Night fell. Gu Shengyin sat alone in the small courtyard. She sat on the stone bench and tried to draw a complicated pattern on the stone table with her fingers. The mysterious lines moved along her fingers, and Gu Shengyin slowly traced the pattern in her mind. Because she was abandoned by her family as a waste, Yuan Tianyi had never learned anything related to cultivation or summoning. At this time, she was relying on the system to teach herself. The so-called self-study was actually just trying to copy the summoning array according to the ancient summoning blueprints. After all, the professional knowledge had already been directly transmitted into her mind by the system. Now, she only needed to practice it. The system was still talking. According to ancient records, there were some exceptionally talented ancient summoners who could summon magical beasts that were bound to their souls before the age of 14. The system stopped halfway through its sentence. Gu Shengyin was also stunned. She was just casually drawing a picture of the summoning array. What was going on? Chapter 1430. On the smooth stone table, a thin layer of light suddenly appeared on the originally empty surface of the table. After those lights lit up, they connected together to form an extremely complex and mysterious pattern. Gu Shengyin, System, Gu Shengyin calmly said, System, it's time for you to shine. The system calmly activated its cheat and used a powerful barrier to surround the entire courtyard. Looking at the appearance of the formation, it was obvious that the host's summoning formation was working. While the person and the system were both very confused, they were also secretly anticipating what would be summoned. However, the mysterious formation was still glowing, but there were no signs of anything appearing. Gu Shengyin looked at it for a while and felt that nothing would appear for the time being, so she prepared to chat with the system. Gu Shengyin said, System, Yuan Tianyi's body is only 10 years old. Meaning that she wasn't 14 years old yet. The system indicated that it knew. Gu Shengyin then said, System, Yuan Tianyi doesn't seem to have awakened her ancient summoner bloodline. The system seriously said that it knew. Gu Shengyin continued, That was the first time I drew a summoning formation, so I just randomly drew it. The system thought that if it was in human form right now, it would definitely have a cigarette in its mouth and a face full of vicissitudes. Finally, Gu Shengyin asked, I said so much because I want to know how I was able to draw a summoning formation successfully. A summoning formation wasn't an easy formation to draw. Precisely because of the idea behind it, it was extremely difficult to draw. Its difficulty didn't lie in the pattern, but in the conditions required to draw a summoning formation. The power of the soul, the understanding of the summoning technique, the sincerity of the heart without any impurities. All of these conditions needed to be met. However, Gu Shengyin looked at the formation she drew while chatting with the system and fell silent. The system also used silence to answer her. To be honest, it also didn't know how the host was able to draw a summoning formation so smoothly. This didn't make sense. Just as the man and the system fell silent, there was finally a change in the summoning circle. The kind-hearted rune slowly dimmed, but at the final moment, all the light spots gathered in one place and fell to the ground. It was as if a figure was condensed from the light. A tall and slender figure gradually took shape from the light. Gu Shengyin stared with wide eyes until the figure completely appeared in front of him. This person had a head full of crow feather-like long hair that fell straight to the ground. He was wearing a fiery red long robe that tightly wrapped around his slender body. His eyes. Even Gu Shengyin, who was used to seeing countless beauties, couldn't help but reveal a look of amazement when she saw him. It was a beauty that could not be described by human imagination. When such a gorgeous and exquisite face appeared on a man's face, it did not seem out of place at all. The most eye-catching thing was the delicate red lotus mark between the man's eyebrows. It was as red as blood and complemented the red robe on his body. It was extremely beautiful. Such a person, no matter where he appeared, would definitely steal everyone's attention as long as he appeared. However, such a gorgeous beauty did not seem frivolous or flirtatious at all when you looked at him. Chapter 1431. Gu Shengyin blinked, then blinked again. Actually, she didn't quite understand the situation. Wasn't it a summoning array? Wouldn't it summon a magical beast? What was going on when she summoned a person? However, before she could figure it out, she felt her body become light. Her body had already left the ground and landed in someone's embrace. At the same time, the elegant fragrance of lotus flowers enveloped her from all directions. Gu Shengyin was dumbfounded. Did she accidentally summon her lover? Human, were you the one who summoned me? A clear and cold voice rang in her ears. Gu Shengyin was stunned for a moment, then realized that the other party was talking to her. She wasn't afraid, and directly turned her body so that she was facing the man. I was just trying out the array described in the book. I didn't expect. Her voice unconsciously became a little softer under the man's oppressive gaze. Trying out. The man sized up Gu Shengyin without leaving a trace. Almost in an instant, he clearly saw her age and cultivation level. He glanced at the courtyard again, and when he felt the remaining power on the stone table, his eyebrows trembled. He was actually summoned so casually. I don't see anything extraordinary about you. At most, you have the bloodline of an ancient summoner. How did you summon me? The man frowned, obviously puzzled. Even 1,000 years ago, when the human summoners were at their strongest, there was no summoner who had the ability to summon him. How did this ordinary little human girl do it? Before he could figure it out, he felt a cool little hand gently brushing against his eyebrows. Gu Shengyin also knew that her actions were too abrupt, but when she saw his frown, she couldn't help but want to smooth it out. He had to be happy. Although he looked good like this, it didn't suit her. The man was obviously stunned. He had lived for more than 10,000 years, and no one had ever dared to treat him like this. Of course, no one had ever had the chance to treat him like this. If others dared to treat him with such an offensive attitude, perhaps that person's hand would be gone by now. But this human girl in front of him, how could he describe this feeling? When her hand fell between his eyebrows, it was as if a feather gently brushed across his heart, or as if a warm light fell into the bottom of his heart. He didn't hate this feeling, and he liked it. The man who had always followed his heart hugged her a little tighter, and even took the initiative to rub his face against Gu Shengyin's hand. Gu Shengyin originally wanted to take her hand back, but seeing him like this, her heart almost melted. She had never thought that an adult man would be so adorable when he did such an action. She continued to caress his face reluctantly. Gu Shengyin let out a dry cough and reluctantly withdrew his hand. He asked, "Who are you? What's your name?" The slightly cold touch on his face disappeared, and the man was a little unhappy. But seeing Gu Shengyin sitting in his arms, her bright black eyes staring at him without blinking, her pupils filled with his own reflection, his mood improved again. "My name is Lin Yuan, the ruler of the 9 Hells Purgatory." The ruler of the 9 Hells Purgatory. Gu Shengyin's eyes widened when she heard this name. Chapter 1432. Because this name had appeared in the original plot. That was after Yuan Tianyi reached the later stage, with countless magical beast underlings under her command, and became an influential figure in the entire magical beast continent. At that time, Yuan Tianyi's strength was extremely powerful in the entire magical beast continent, but she suffered a severe loss in a place, and even had no way to get it back. That place was the 9 Hells Purgatory. And the person who made Yuan Tianyi suffer a loss was the ruler of the 9 Hells Purgatory, Lin Yuan, whose body was a hellfire red lotus. Why did Yuan Tianyi suffer a loss? Because those magical beast underlings under her command, no matter if it was a high-level magical beast or her natal magical beast, the Moonlight Unicorn, when they saw Lin Yuan, they were all trembling in fear and couldn't summon up the will to fight at all. Lin Yuan said that he was the ruler of the 9 Hells Purgatory, but in fact, he was the ruler of all magical beasts. She actually... Just like that, she casually summoned the ultimate boss of the magical beast world? Moreover, this ultimate boss was her lover? Gu Shengyin expressed that this cheat was a bit too big. But she liked it. Seeing a smile suddenly appear on her face, Lin Yuan's mood unconsciously became very good. He asked, "Why are you smiling?" Gu Shengyin looked at him. "Because you are very powerful, I am your summoner." His summoner. The summoner that belonged to him. Lin Yuan's mood became better because of this sentence. As for Gu Shengyin's previous words, he had already ignored them. Lin Yuan stood up and suddenly glanced at the sky of this small courtyard. He frowned and looked deeply at Gu Shengyin in his arms. "I couldn't tell that there was an expert by your side." Gu Shengyin looked at him with an innocent look of, "What are you talking about? I don't understand." Lin Yuan also didn't speak. He held Gu Shengyin in one hand and waved his other hand in the air. The system said to Gu Shengyin, "The barrier I set up was broken by him." Gu Shengyin thought for a moment and asked, "According to the power levels of this world, what kind of strength would be needed to break your barrier?" The system was silent for a moment before it said, "I think you're not the only one who has cheated." Gu Shengyin did not understand what was going on, but the system continued, "This barrier of mine, just in case, was set up according to the original plot of this world's top combat power, but, in the end, Gu Shengyin saw it." Lin Yuan casually broke it as if he was waving away a mosquito. Thus, she also fell into silence. What could she say? Gu Shengyin said, "I don't know anything." Fortunately, Lin Yuan didn't ask any more questions. He glanced at the sky and said to himself, "You humans should be resting at this time, right?" Without waiting for Gu Shengyin's reaction, he directly carried her into the house and walked into Gu Shengyin's room with familiarity. Gu Shengyin. Wait, big brother, this is your first time. Come on, why do you look more skilled than me? Probably because the surprise in her eyes was too obvious, Lin Yuan directly said, "I just used my divine sense to scan it, so the structure of this courtyard is all in my mind." Gu Shengyin didn't say anything. She obediently let Lin Yuan carry her in and take off her shoes for her. Yes, he personally took off her shoes for her. If this scene was seen by the magical beasts of the ninth netherworld, their eyeballs would probably fall out. Was this still the big boss they knew? Chapter 1433. Knowing that he was her lover, he probably wouldn't do anything that would surprise Gu Shengyin too much. Gu Shengyin watched him take off his coat, and then, she directly hugged herself and lay down. Gu Shengyin looked up at him and pointed to herself, "Is it really okay for us to do this?" Lin Yuan raised his eyebrows and looked at her, as if there was something wrong with her. "Fine." Gu Shengyin expressed that she admitted defeat. She obediently closed her eyes and shrank into his arms. Gu Shengyin thought that she would be a little uncomfortable and even unable to sleep, but he obviously underestimated her. Lying in the familiar embrace, it didn't take long for her to feel sleepy and fall into a deep sleep. Sensing that the breathing of the person in his arms had become long, Lin Yuan turned his head and looked at her seriously. He used his eyes to copy all the corners of her eyes and eyebrows over and over again, until this shadow was firmly engraved in his heart, and then he closed his eyes in satisfaction. There was a smile on his face that even he himself didn't notice. When Gu Shengyin woke up the next day, she found that the other party was still here. She felt a little strange. "Isn't it strange that I'm still here?" Lin Yuan didn't even look at her, and asked. Gu Shengyin nodded. Because if the summoner and his own magical beast didn't sign a life contract and let it become his own magical beast, that magical beast would return to the space where he originally lived. Last night, Gu Shengyin didn't sign a contract with Lin Yuan. Logically speaking, Lin Yuan should have left by this time. Lin Yuan sneered, "How can those trash compare with me?" Unknowingly, Lin Yuan himself didn't realize that when facing Gu Shengyin, his self-title had changed from I to I. Gu Shengyin. Well, that's true. After all, the person in front of her, even the system admitted that he had cheated. Seeing Gu Shengyin lowering her head obediently, Lin Yuan suddenly said, "Little girl Tianyi, will you sign a contract with me?" Gu Shengyin raised his head and stared at him in surprise. She was not surprised that Lin Yuan would know her understanding. What really surprised her was that he actually took the initiative to ask to sign a contract with her. One had to know that for a powerhouse at Lin Yuan's level, signing a contract with a summoner would not give him any benefits. In the original plot, Yuan Tianyi also tried to subdue this king of magical beasts, but in the end, she just left. And now, Lin Yuan actually took the initiative to request to sign a contract with him? Gu Shengyin thought about it and said, "Lin Yuan, signing a contract with me won't do you any good. Aren't you doing well now? Anyway, you can always stay by my side." "That's different," Lin Yuan suddenly said. "The summoning contract can connect our souls together," Lin Yuan said in a low voice. This was the most intimate relationship in the world. There was one more thing he didn't say. Gu Shengyin was a summoner, and one day she would find a magical beast to form a contract with. He simply couldn't bear the fact that the person in front of him had such a close relationship with other magical beasts. So, it was better to change it to himself. Gu Shengyin was originally unwilling, but Lin Yuan had always insisted. Finally, under the man's almost coercive gaze, Gu Shengyin bit her middle finger and put her finger between his eyebrows. 8 o'clock. March 1st. In the new month, Everyone has a monthly ticket in their hands. Remember to vote for Gao Lengji. Rush the list. Rush the list. Rush the list. Every month, I'm in 6th place. My heart really hurts. Sob. Chapter 1434. Something mysterious came into her mind from Gu Xingyin's middle finger that was stuck between Lin Yuan's eyebrows. When she put down her finger, she began to feel that there seemed to be a strange connection between herself and Lin Yuan. She couldn't tell what kind of feeling this connection was, but if the other party had any strong emotional fluctuations, she seemed to be able to detect it. It was very strange, but she didn't hate it. She couldn't help but laugh. Then, she heard a very unpleasant voice coming from outside the courtyard. Yuan Tianyi, come out. Gu Shengyin looked out of the window. It was still very early at this time. Perhaps the breakfast in the Yuan residence hadn't been ready yet. Why did Yuan Qin come to her at this time? Gu Shengyin didn't intend to pay attention to her. This woman was also stupid. Didn't she know that at this time, everyone preferred silence? Sure enough, without waiting for Gu Shengyin to speak, Yuan Qin heard the angry barking of a dog from the courtyard next door. Then, Yuan Tianheng, who made her afraid at a glance, came out with his big black dog. Yuan Qin, shouting so early in the morning, where is your upbringing? Yuan Tianheng also had a poisonous mouth. He also knew what kind of words could hit the nail on the head. Sure enough, his one sentence made Yuan Qin's face turn pale. Yuan Tianheng didn't pay attention to her anymore. Instead, he turned and left his courtyard. He didn't intervene in the matter between Yuan Qin and Yuan Tianyi. He just taught Yuan Qin a lesson because she disturbed him. Although he felt that he and Yuan Tianyi were already friends, there were some things that he shouldn't do. Otherwise, Yuan Tianyi wouldn't really stand up in this life. Yuan Qin saw that there was still no response from Gu Xingyin's small courtyard. She was angry and directly pushed open the courtyard door. Lin Yuan frowned. Before Gu Shengyin could stop it, Yuan Qin's whole body flew out. Gu Shengyin looked at Lin Yuan and frowned. This kind of person is not worth your time. I'll do it. Lin Yuan looked down at her. Few people dared to speak to him in such a reproachful tone. But, he nodded. I will pay attention next time. Since she was the one who said it, he would listen to her. Outside the courtyard, Yuan Qin bent over and spat out a mouthful of blood. She looked at Gu Xingyin's courtyard in shock, as if she was looking at something extremely terrifying. At that moment, she even felt the aura of death. When did Yuan Tianyi's courtyard have such a powerful master? Could it be that the clan had also arranged for a protector for her? No, that was impossible. The family would never waste resources on a piece of trash. Moreover, if she had a protector, how could she have let him bully her like this in the past? Gu Xingyin's figure appeared in front of her. Yuan Qin struggled to get up from the ground and looked at Gu Xingyin with fear. Yuan Tianyi, what did you do? Who's in your courtyard? Gu Xingyin ignored her. He looked at her and said indifferently, You don't have to care who he is. I just want to tell you that he has a bad temper. If there's a next time, it won't be as simple as vomiting blood. After that, she ignored Yuan Qin's green and white face and turned away. Yuan Qin looked at Gu Shengyin with resentment. Such an arrogant look made her hate that she couldn't. Cough, cough, cough. A dull pain came from her chest. Yuan Qin withdrew her gaze and wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth with her sleeve. The corner of her mouth hooked up into a cold smile. Yuan Tianyi, so what if you have a backer? Can it be bigger than the Yuan family? I just want to know, a direct descendant who blatantly violated the Yuan family's rules, and a piece of trash who can't become a summoner, how will the family deal with it? Chapter 1435. Yuan Qin left Gu Xingyin's courtyard with a pale face. Looking at her appearance, Gu Shengyin knew that this woman was not reconciled. However, with Yuan Qin's IQ and ability, there were only a few things she could do for revenge. Coincidentally, no matter which one it was, Gu Shengyin would not feel afraid. With Yuan Qin's strength, even she would be able to subdue others, not to mention that Gu Shengyin now had the #1 golden thigh of the continent of magical beasts by his side. She was in a good mood and was ready to wait for the servants of the Yuan mansion to bring breakfast. After that, she would discuss the future with Lin Yuan. But she couldn't eat breakfast. Because when she walked into the room, a burst of unexpected pain directly exploded from Gu Shengyin's body. As if the blood all over her body was boiling, Gu Shengyin even had an illusion that she would burn out in this extreme heat and pain. She fell to the ground uncontrollably, but she didn't touch the cold ground. Instead, she fell into a cool embrace. Lin Yuan held her firmly in his arms. He could feel her pain at the moment. After concluding the contract, both sides could perceive to a certain extent what the other side was suffering. Lin Yuan's face darkened when he felt the scorching pain. He could only feel a trace of Gu Shengyin's feelings at this time, and it was already so serious. It could be imagined how much pain the other party was facing at the moment. Lin Yuan frowned. When he had just probed, he had already discovered that it was not that something had happened to Gu Shengyin, but that the ancient summoner bloodline in her body had awakened. The bloodline that should have been awakened at the age of 14 was triggered in advance because she had successfully signed a contract with herself. Lin Yuan looked at Gu Shengyin's pale face because of the pain, and the hair on her temples had been soaked with cold sweat. He thought for a moment, reached out his hand, and a white jade bed appeared in the small courtyard. It was unknown what material the white jade bed was made of, but it still exuded a dense chill under the sun. Lin Yuan gently placed her on the bed. Perhaps it was because of the bed, but Lin Yuan could clearly see that the other party's expression had eased up a little. His expression softened as he sat beside the bed. He took out a snow-white handkerchief and gently wiped the sweat off Gu Shengyin's face. If it were for any other reason, he might be able to help. However, there was nothing he could do about the bloodline awakening. He could only let her endure it herself. Gu Shengyin felt as if she had fallen into a huge furnace. She was surrounded by crimson flames, which burned her skin, flesh, and even her soul mercilessly. His consciousness was dizzy and he was about to fall into chaos amidst the pain. No. There seemed to be an obsession in the depths of her mind that kept her awake. She absolutely could not fall under this pain. Lin Yuan saw her frown again and couldn't help but reach out to hold her hand, but his heart suddenly moved. His gaze instantly turned cold as he looked at the courtyard gate. Yuan Qin was respectfully following behind an old man. The old man was wearing a black and white robe. He was serious and looked very unapproachable. Behind him, there were several young disciples who were similarly dressed. This was the Yuan family, the people of the law enforcement hall. Chapter 1436. As soon as the old man, who was also the Yuan family's law enforcement elder, entered the door, he saw Lin Yuan sitting in the courtyard and coldly looking at him. The aura coming from the person opposite him was too strong, making the law enforcement elder's heart tremble. His face was still so stern, but his tone was very polite. "May I know who you are? Why did you suddenly appear in my Yuan family? Why did you injure my Yuan family disciple?" When he said this, his eyes happened to see the white jade couch next to Lin Yuan, and the unconscious Gu Shengyin on the couch. Of course he recognized the third miss of the direct line, this white jade couch. His eyes suddenly shrank. If he didn't see wrong, this was a jade couch carved out of a whole piece of 10,000-year-old cold jade. How precious was 10,000-year-old cold jade? Even a small piece was hard to find, let alone a whole piece like this? Even the powerful Yuan family didn't have such a large cold jade couch. Who was this man? What was his relationship with the third miss? The law enforcement elder was thinking in his heart, but Lin Yuan looked at Yuan Qin behind him. Obviously, the injured Yuan family disciple was referring to her. The reason why the people from the Yuan clan's law enforcement hall were here was obvious. Lin Yuan sneered. He said indifferently, "I am Yuan Tianyi's contracted magical beast. Your family's disciple really didn't pay attention to etiquette. If there's a next time, it won't be as simple as injuring." How arrogant! Ever since the law enforcement elder took charge of the law enforcement hall, no one dared to speak to him in such a tone for a long time. If it was a normal day, he would certainly teach that person what it meant to be careful with words and actions. But at this moment, his mind was not on this at all. He just looked at Lin Yuan in horror and said, "What did you say?" Not to mention that the third miss was only 10 years old, far from the age of awakening as a summoner. Didn't she test out a low-level talent and have no possibility of becoming a summoner? What did this man mean? Lin Yuan frowned. Did this person not understand human language? He was in a bad mood, so the pressure on his body was naturally stronger. The law enforcement elder's body suddenly flashed with white light, and a huge cloud-soaring eagle appeared beside him. It was actually an automatic warning from the contract. It was directly forced out by the opponent's aura. This cloud-soaring eagle was the law enforcement elder's contracted magical beast. It was at level 8 and was considered one of the top magical beasts. This time, it had sensed that the contractor was in danger, so it immediately activated the contract and rushed to his side. However, as soon as it appeared, the cloud-soaring eagle did not even have the time to observe its surroundings before it was suppressed by a terrifying yet familiar aura. It carefully looked in the direction of the abyss. With just a glance, the majestic cloud-soaring eagle's feathers all puffed up. Oh my God! Why did this person come out? At this moment, the cloud-soaring eagle wished that it could shrink its body to the point where it could not be seen and hide in some crevice. The cloud-soaring condor's emotions were directly transmitted to Patriarch of Law Enforcement's mind. His heart sank. What kind of existence could cause the 8th-grade cloud-soaring eagle to be so afraid of? But before he could speak, Yuan Qin jumped out from behind him. As soon as Yuan Qin entered the courtyard, she was stunned by Lin Yuan's appearance and bearing. She stared at him for a long time until the other party's cold words made her come back to her senses. Chapter 1437. The other side's words were understated, but no one would doubt the authenticity of it. This red-clothed man was clearly protecting Yuan Tianyi, that waste. Yuan Qin couldn't help but feel jealous once again. She simply didn't understand. Yuan Tianyi, that waste who couldn't become a summoner, was raised by the family with good food and drink, but why? Yuan Tianheng would speak for her, and now, even such a strange man was standing up for her, saying that it was her contractual magical beast? Lying without thinking, who didn't know that Yuan Tianyi was a waste with low talent? She knew that the man in front of her was very powerful, and she could guess it from the polite tone of the law enforcement elder. But Yuan Qin was not afraid. So what if he was powerful? Could he be more powerful than the whole Yuan family? This was also the reason why she dared to stand up at this moment. The Yuan family couldn't watch their own disciple have an accident on the Yuan family's territory. So Yuan Qin said in a sharp tone, "Your Excellency, before you speak, you should inquire about it first. My third sister is a well-known inferior talent. It is impossible to summon a magical beast. What's more, she is only 10 years old this year. If you want to protect her, you should find a better reason, right?" Lin Yuan glanced at her and couldn't help but move his fingers. According to his temper, such an insensible and weak human being, it was best to directly eliminate her. But he remembered what Gu Shengyin said to her before. It seemed that she preferred to do it herself. He thought about it and resisted the urge to do it. Lin Yuan's gaze returned to Gu Shengyin's pale face, and said without looking back, "You are a waste yourself. Do you think everyone else is a waste like you?" Yuan Qin was angry, but couldn't find any strong words to refute for a while. The law enforcement elder's face was not very good. After all, the other side's words, after careful consideration, seemed to scold all of them. He suppressed the anger in his heart and said in a low voice, "Your Excellency, I came here this time very seriously to—" Lin Yuan felt that these people were really noisy. He looked at Gu Shengyin's pale face on the cold jade couch and felt that the voice in his ear was really annoying. Noisy. He impatiently waved his sleeves and directly kicked them out. The courtyard door directly closed in front of them with a loud bang. Elder? A disciple's nervous voice called out to Elder of Law Enforcement. Elder of Law Enforcement regained his composure and concealed the horror that rose from his heart. What kind of person was that man in red to be able to pull off such a trick? The Patriarch of Law Enforcement said calmly, "I'll ask the family head. This person is not someone we can touch. There's no need for that." An old voice came from behind him. When Elder of Law Enforcement saw clearly who the person in front of him was, he was so scared that his knees went soft and he knelt down. "Ancestor!" All the Yuan family disciples around him followed suit and knelt down. Yuan Qin was no exception. She was a little curious. The old ancestor of the Yuan family was a legendary figure. It was said that he had broken through the level of a level 9 summoner several hundred years ago and entered the higher level of the mysterious realm. Normally, this old ancestor would be in seclusion and would not see outsiders. Today he actually came out. She carefully raised her head, wanting to look at the ancestor, but she just happened to meet his penetrating gaze. Chapter 1438. Yuan Qin only felt that the Yuan family patriarch's gaze seemed to penetrate everything and directly landed on the bottom of her heart. The resentment, and filthy thoughts that were deeply hidden in her heart were all exposed under such a gaze. She couldn't help but lower her head to avoid this gaze. The Yuan family patriarch actually only glanced at her. Seeing Yuan Qin's reaction, the Yuan family patriarch didn't mind. With his status, it wasn't worthwhile to argue with a junior of the family. At this moment, Elder Jifa, who was kneeling at the front, carefully raised his head and said to the Yuan family patriarch, "Patriarch, what are you doing?" The Yuan family patriarch raised his head and looked at Gu Xingyin's small courtyard. The corner of his mouth revealed a secret smile. How can an old man like me not personally receive an important guest of the family? Important guest? The enforcement elder thought of the man in the third Mrs. Courtyard. With such power and influence, even the patriarch had appeared. Who exactly was he? The law enforcement elder thought about his previous words with cold sweat. He was sure that he had not been disrespectful to the distinguished guest. Then, he felt a little relieved. But Yuan Qin was different. In her heart, the Yuan family was a colossus that even the imperial family of the Dragon Phoenix Empire had to treat with respect. She thought that no matter how powerful that man was, he couldn't be more powerful than the Yuan family. But what was the situation now? The patriarch, who couldn't even be invited to the emperor's birthday, actually came out of seclusion for this red-clothed man. And he even called him an important guest? Yuan Qin thought of the words she said to vent her anger. She immediately lost all her strength and almost collapsed in front of the patriarch. No, that kind of big shot always had their eyes on the top of their heads and didn't care about the lower world. They wouldn't lower themselves to her level. She comforted herself. The Yuan family patriarch glanced at them. Obviously, he knew that these juniors were very nervous because he was here. "All of you leave. Don't disturb us here." The law enforcement elder hurriedly complied. Then, he left with his disciples and his cloud-soaring eagle, which had been scared out of its wits. Yuan Qin was full of doubts. Although she really wanted to know what happened, she didn't dare to say anything because of the patriarch's power. After everyone had left, only then did the Yuan family ancestor put away the trace of kindness on his face. With a solemn expression, he said to the small courtyard, "Esteemed guests have arrived. Is it possible for this old man, the host, to pay a visit?" He was in seclusion when he suddenly sensed a powerful force in his own residence. Although this power disappeared in the blink of an eye, he didn't dare to let his guard down in the slightest. With such a strong power, this person could even threaten him. Who was the Yuan family's old ancestor? He knew in his heart that there were only a few people on this continent who could reach this level. Regardless of who it was, the Yuan family didn't want to make an enemy out of them. Therefore, when he opened his mouth, he lowered his stance slightly. The door of the small courtyard opened with a loud bang. Lin Yuan treated the strong with enough respect, especially the courteous strong, although this strong person was not really in his eyes. When the Yuan family patriarch entered the small courtyard and saw the figure sitting on a simple stone bench, he began to rejoice in his heart that he had been polite enough. Chapter 1439. With his temperament, he naturally wouldn't show anything on his face, but only he knew how shocked and puzzled he was in his heart. The Yuan family's old ancestor walked in and saw Lin Yuan sitting beside a little girl in the courtyard. It looked like he was protecting her. He sensed this little girl and found that she actually had his Yuan family's bloodline. Thinking about it, he was delighted. From the looks of it, this person's relationship with his family's junior wasn't shallow. If the Yuan family could obtain this person's help, thinking of that possibility, the Yuan family's old ancestor revealed a trace of a smile. He cupped his hands towards Lin Yuan. I wonder why Lin Yuan Jun has come to my Yuan residence? With Lin Yuan's strength and status, it was enough for him to address him as Lin Yuan Jun. Lin Yuan raised his head and looked at him, only saying one sentence, I am this girl's contracted magical beast. The Yuan family's old ancestor raised his head in shock, only feeling that his brain that had lived for thousands of years couldn't understand this sentence. The famous Lin Yuan Jun, who was a legend in the hearts of all summoners, actually became someone else's contracted magical beast? All summoners knew that if a summoner wanted to form a contract with a magical beast, it had to be under the premise that both parties were willing. Everyone knew how arrogant this person was. How could he be willing to form a contract with a human girl? But the Yuan family's old ancestor didn't doubt Lin Yuan's words at all. With this person's status and personality, it was impossible for him to lie about this matter. The Yuan family's old ancestor couldn't help but curiously look at Gu Shengyin. He was really curious. What kind of summoner could actually make Lin Yuan Jun willingly form a contract with her? When he saw it, his expression became strange. Not to mention that she was only 10 years old, although the continent of magical beasts publicly recognized that summoning contracts started at 14 years old. As a saint-level summoner, the Yuan family's old ancestor naturally knew that as long as one had enough talent and soul power, they didn't have to wait until they were 14 years old. But, no matter how he looked at it, this junior with his family's bloodline seemed to be a trash with no talent for summoning. If it was any other time, when he saw this kind of seedling, he definitely wouldn't have the mood to take a second look. But just thinking about how she was Lin Yuan Jun's contracted summoner, the Yuan family's old ancestor felt that he couldn't wait to study this girl properly. Even an old fellow like him who had lived for thousands of years couldn't help but be jealous of the Abyssal Lord Summoner. That was the Lord of the Abyss who could make all magical beasts lower their heads and call him Lord. The Yuan family patriarch was, after all, an expert who had stepped into the ultimate saint realm. After taking a closer look, he could tell that something was amiss. There seemed to be some kind of mysterious power sealed within the body of his junior, and at this moment, that power was showing signs of slowly awakening. This is... The Yuan family patriarch furrowed his brows and sensed for a while. Suddenly, he was overjoyed. This was the ancient summoner bloodline. From this, one could see the difference between the Yuan family's patriarch and Lin Yuan. At that time, Lin Yuan only took a glance and almost saw through Gu Shengyin's background. As for the Yuan family patriarch, he didn't notice anything at first glance. It wasn't until later that he realized that Gu Shengyin possessed the ancient summoner bloodline. The Yuan family patriarch was both surprised and overjoyed. An ancient summoner. That was a powerful existence in the legends who could command countless magical beasts with their own strength. His Yuan family actually had a descendant who possessed the ancient summoner bloodline. Moreover, looking at the current situation, this bloodline was in the midst of awakening. Chapter 1440. No wonder this junior of his was able to summon a peerless expert like the Abyssal Lord. The smile on his face couldn't be any more beautiful. The Abyssal Lord was in a bad mood. Couldn't this old man restrain the way he was looking at his little girl? What business do you have here? He coldly reminded the old man. What did he come here for? The old man finally remembered that he had come here to take a look because he had sensed a shocking aura coming from the estate. But now that he knew the Abyssal Lord's identity and reason for coming here, his heart had long since calmed down. Moreover, he was even happier than when he had broken through. The Abyssal Lord had become the contracted beast of a Yuan descendant. There was simply no better news than this. However, he glanced at the Abyssal Lord. It was clear that the other party didn't welcome his arrival. He glanced at his own junior who was still unconscious, and had a rough idea of what the Abyssal Lord was feeling. The contracted beast was connected to the summoner's soul. The Abyssal Lord was probably extremely worried about the summoner's safety. At this time, he naturally wouldn't be nice to outsiders who came to disturb him. However, the old man didn't feel that he was being slighted at all. This was good. The more the Abyssal Lord cared about his summoner, the happier the old man would be. As long as the summoner was still a member of the Yuan family, then the Abyssal Lord and the Yuan family would naturally be on the same side. But the old man had taken things for granted. He had never thought about what would happen if the Abyssal Lord summoner didn't treat him as a member of the Yuan family. The old man already knew everything he needed to know. After returning, he specially called the head of the Yuan family over and instructed him to treat the third miss of the estate, Yuan Tianyi, well. The Yuan family head who was called out was dumbfounded. He was in charge of such a large family. Among the younger generation, who would have the time to care about an invisible person, unless the person was his direct descendant or an extremely talented junior in the family? He didn't even know who this third miss was. But since the old man had spoken, he had to know even if he didn't know. He had to take good care of her. The head of the Yuan family even felt an inexplicable sense of envy towards the third miss. He didn't know what kind of luck this third miss, Yuan Tianyi, had to have received the old man's recognition. This was a huge benefit. He hurriedly ordered his trusted aide to pass on his message. The third miss of the mansion will receive the same treatment as the eldest young master of the family, Yuan Tianqin. When this order was given, it immediately caused an uproar in the Yuan residence. Who was Yuan Tianqin? At the beginning of this year, at the age of 14, he had successfully summoned a magical beast of the 9th rank, the violet-winged thunder dragon. Although the purple-winged dragon wouldn't be by Yuan Tianqin's side now, Yuan Tianqin was still only a 5th-level summoner. Before he became a true powerhouse, the purple-winged thunder dragon wouldn't easily make a move. At most, it would protect his safety at critical moments. High-level magical beasts all had their own temperament and dignity. But even so, everyone looked at him as if they were looking at a future powerhouse. With his talent, it was only a matter of time before he became a level 9 summoner. Young Master Yuan Tianqin naturally enjoyed the best resources in the family, so the Yuan family's younger generation accepted this wholeheartedly. But who was Yuan Tianyi? Trash who wasn't even a summoner. What right did she have to enjoy the same treatment as eldest young master? You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.